Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar with Dr. Massimo Mangialavori, where he will introduce the new version of his repertory, Suggesta 2.0, using Similia Homeopathy software. I will first show an infographic on the repertory. So Massimo can tell us some information, can start. And so welcome, Massimo. Thank you to be here. I think you don't need any introduction. One of the most acclaimed homeopath worldwide. Thank you for doing this webinar. And yeah, I leave it to you.
Okay, can I start using my...
So I shared now the picture. If I don't know if you want to go through the numbers, and then when you want, you can replace it. You can share, your own screen with them.
Thank you so much. Okay, so first of all, good evening, good night. So at least I'm in Italy and it's 8 p.m. And thank you to Marco for this invitation. I was really happy and extremely interested when Marco contacted me in order to talk about this possible collaboration. And I was extremely intrigued by that. First of all, because it's a, let me say, difficult and sad moment in the history of homeopathic medicine. There are so few young students, more or less all over the world. Even in India now, in Brazil, the number is diminishing, is decreasing. So to see that somebody young like him has even the idea of designing a new program, for me it is something challenging, thrilling, extremely interesting, intriguing, and so on. You know that I have a special interest, a special eye, a special love for computer programs. I did a lot of work for more than 17 years with my very best friend, David Workington. Together we did a lot for the development of his beautiful program, Mac Repertory, which today does not exist anymore. And so whenever it is possible to do something in this direction, I'm extremely intrigued. Also for another reason, let me say, I am still asking to myself, I'm wondering how it is possible that after the entrance of computers in our beautiful homeopathic medicine, it's now more than 30 years. I remember I bought my first computer in '88. I think that still our program, let me say without offending anybody, are really working in a very, very, very simple way. If you think what a computer can do nowadays, to buy a program, to buy a computer, and to use it just to repertorize, and to use to repertorize how the most common computer do today, for me it's like having a beautiful Ferrari with the wheels of a wooden chariot, something like that. So I was really intrigued when Marco asked me to collaborate, because I was not only interested in offering him the possibility of sharing my repertory, but also the possibility of improving his program, and mainly the strategy of analyzing our cases. But we will talk about this in another conference later on. So why? I said something about David not to celebrate and to remember my best friend, but because at the end it is his fault if this repertory does exist. He had some problems with this program. And I remember that one day we were studying together and improving his program. It was more or less around the 98, something like this. And I showed him my additions, the one that I used for my own personal use, the one that were the result of my good cases from my personal database. You should know that I'm working with a database that I designed for myself more or less more than 35 years ago. And in this program, I keep writing my cases verbatim, which means that whenever I see a new patient, I write more or less, let me say, the 80%, the 90% of what the patient says with his own words. And I started to do that many, many years ago. I should tell you that at that time I really hate to use computers, but I understood, let me say, that this tool was much better than writing my cases with my hands on a sheet of paper, because you can understand that if later on you want to make a study, a research, a combination of your data on a sheet of paper, it's impossible. While with the database, and along the time, our database improved so much, with the database is much, much easier. So my standard, slowly going on, became more and more strict. And so when I was working with David in 98, my standards were not as strict as they are today. But let me say that now, my additions come from cases where I prescribed this remedy, only this remedy, for a long amount of time. So I don't consider a good case something where the follow-up is not at least 4 or 5 years. And during this amount of time, I never had to change my prescription, which doesn't mean that all my patients are like this, not at all. I mean that it happens that if you work in a certain way and if you are not only lucky to prescribe successfully a remedy, you can work with this in acute, relapse, and in every condition. So I think that when those cases are available, from my point of view, those are the most reliable ones, because from those patients, as I say, in any condition, this remedy works. So when I have at least 4 or 5 cases with 4 or 5 years of a follow-up without the necessity of changing this remedy, I try to seek which kind of symptoms, eventually even with kind of themes, are together, and I started to make those additions. At the beginning, this idea was not at all thinking about something that I could share. As I'm saying, it was just for my very personal use. When David saw that, he told me, but are you crazy, Massimo? These materials can be very interesting for our colleagues. So he had to push me a lot, honestly, because I was not so open to share my material. Not because I was jealous, because I was really thinking it was something not that interesting for my colleagues. And little by little, we started to come out more or less every year with the new editions. After a while, it was not a while, it was around 2008, so more or less after 10 years, he realized that the editions were more than 25,000. And so he said, Massimo, you should think to work on your own repertory. And I was not so open to that for a few reasons. First of all, because I don't know if you have an idea of which kind of work is to do a repertory, to work on a repertory. And second, I was not only really scared because I was very busy writing my books and many other things. I think that it was not even necessary because there were already existing other very good programs. So at that time, the synthesis repertory was already working since a long time. At that time, the complete repertory, which was the one which I used as the basis of my editions, were really out with good material. So I said to him, I don't see any good reason to come out with the new repertory when there are already more than a couple that are so good. But little by little, I changed my mind, not only because of my editions that at that time were not requested. Only later on, it happens that just the synthesis and even later on the reliable program asked me to add part of my editions. They don't have all. They have my editions for what I did for a few years. So there are not more than 25,000. And if you give a look to the numbers that Marco were able to come out, now there are more than 45,000 additions, a huge number. But, you know, I thought that the repertory, as it was written, from my point of view, had many problems that needed to be fixed. Many problems. Mistakes, not correct additions, problems of translation, problems of using a language that is so obsolete that if a new doctor would like to give a look in our material, they can be scary. I think that I'm sure that when you were students, it is just not so easy to study homeopathy as it is. But if you have to think about the use of the repertory, considering that you have to learn the code of this repertory, so in which way certain kind of symptoms are written, okay? Think about the sense of insecurity, which is called want of self-confidence. Think about symptoms that are really moralistic, as Kant was a very moralistic person. So many of those symptoms in the mind section, especially, of course, are extremely judgmental. I think that a good doctor shouldn't write something like this. And also, many words are very inappropriate. If you consider that at the time of the first repertory, certain concepts were completely unknown. It was not known what is the ovulation, because the repertory is written in a very sexist way. Think about how many symptoms you have about women, and there is nothing about men. So why you have so many symptoms about the menopause, climateric period, there is nothing about andropause? Why? This is not mentioned at all. Why is not taught to give out with some information like this? Think about all the symptoms concerning the sexuality, how badly written they are, how judgmental they are. And also, beyond that, there is still a big discrepancy, a gigantic discussion in our community if the most important source of information are our books, our literature, our proving, versus the information coming from good cases. I personally think that this discussion is useless. It's not one better than another. I think that the proving symptoms are like when you come to Italy and see a beautiful fresco in one of those fantastic cathedrals. You have some spot, and then you have to understand, to figure out how was the entire picture, which is what happened with your patient. But I think that even the best homeopath in the world, the best teacher in the world, could never experience what a patient cured with a certain remedy, what certain kind of symptoms means. I can try to figure out, I can have a good interpretation, I can have a good idea, I can have a kind of a fantasy vision which can allow me to try to understand something. But when you experience in your practice to be in contact with the patient that was really treated successfully with a certain kind of remedy, and you ask him, sorry, what does it mean, this kind of symptom for you? What is your experience about that? You will realize that often patients treated with the same remedy can tell you the same kind of things, which was not probably exactly what you were really thinking before. So this is the real source of the real experience of what it means a remedy, in my opinion. And so I added a lot of this symptom in my database. And at the end, this is what I think a clinical experience should be. We were talking a few minutes ago with Marco about the numbers that he get out from this research. Let me say that at the time of Kent, of the first repertory of Kent, it made a lot of sense to think that we had to improve the quantity of our information. I don't think at all that now we have the same problem. Now the problem is that we have too many data. I used to consider these two different words to make a differentiation between what is a data and what is an information. A data does not mean something that is really useful in order to understand something else better. So I think that one day we should have the courage to stop and to ask to ourselves if a better homeopathic medicine is adding, not to say vomiting continuously new symptoms and new remedies in our books, or to stop a little bit and work on the quality of this information more than the quantity. Now, homeopathy too has to face the same problem of many other disciplines, where the amount of data is gigantic, but the quality of the data is not like this. So at the end, I decided to consider the suggestion of my best friend David, and I told him, okay, I will work on that, but only if you allow me to work together to create a new tool. So not something which could be in competition with the other programs already existing, because it is not what I want to do. Let me say that theoretically speaking, at least, in the case of the synthetic repertory, in the case of the reliable repertory, it is like this. In the case of the complete, not really, to be honest, in my opinion. But something is to investigate as precise as possible to the sources of our information and to try to add from these sources as precise as possible these symptoms in the repertory, because you should remember that whatever you try to do in the repertory, you have always to scatter those symptoms and to arrange in a way which is respecting the code of the repertory. So very often you lose the context, you lose the frame of this sentence, of this symptom. So the aim of this repertory is to be precise as much as possible with our literature, which is something. I don't think that I needed to do the same because this work is already done. As I said, I tried to work on adding as much as possible clinical, reliable symptoms coming from my patients, following the rules, following the condition that I told you before. So little by little, I started to do this work many years ago, I told you. And since that time, I'm still doing this work. At the moment, there are symptoms more or less about the remedy, which I know pretty well, which are around 700. And I added a good amount of symptoms from 1/7 of these remedies. So we're still working in order to make it better, in order to add clinical clear symptoms, precise symptoms, confirmed symptoms. But another work that we decided to do was to correct the words which are imprecise, was to get rid of what, in my personal opinion, is not that right, because the repertory is still full of mistakes. And you know, I think also something else. I don't think it is just my opinion, but when you have to do with what we call the polycrests, these remedies with that in some cases can arrive to some thousands of symptoms. Belladonna, if I'm not wrong, sulfur, they have more than 30,000 symptoms in the repertory. Think about that, because this huge amount of data are not necessarily interesting to give you an idea how to differentiate one remedy from another. If you think about these 30,000 symptoms, I don't think it is just my opinion, but very probably not more than 300 are really useful. The other are common symptoms that it's possible that belladonna sulfur could have, but they're not the symptoms that you can use precisely to differentiate sulfur from another remedy or belladonna from another remedy. So beyond the issue of, as I said in a bad way, vomiting symptoms and remedies inside of this huge container, we should think about how useful those symptoms are, how clinically confirmed, and how these symptoms can help you to differentiate one remedy from another. Otherwise, at the end, it happens what happened to the most of the programs at the very beginning, that without a precise algorithm, at the end, when you made a repertory analysis, they were always the first important polycrest in our materia medica, because those are the ones with the largest amount of symptoms in our repertory. So thinking about how to make it better, you know, reorganizing, rearranging a repertory, it's a huge task, and I think it's not possible to decide that one way is surely better than another. It's always a point of view. It is always a perspective. My perspective in that case was to work mainly on a functional perspective. So in some way, inviting the user of our Suggesta, and it is called Suggesta because it is a suggester, so it's not a Bible, as a repertory shouldn't be a Bible. Even the Bible is not the Bible, you have to say. So think about our repertory can be something like this. It's a suggester, so something which is suggesting you, I hope, something useful and interesting and reliable. So the aim, the goal is to clean, is to get rid of what is redundant, is to get rid, from my point of view, of what is imprecise, of what is useless, and to add information which are as most as possible clinically confirmed. In the second edition, which is the one that we are seeing this night, there is another big change, which is a section about illnesses. This has to be clearly explained. I mean that, theoretically speaking, we as homeopaths shouldn't be interested in which kind of disease is affecting our patient. We should be interested in how this patient is manifesting, suffering with this disease. Theoretically speaking, if you are a good homeopath, to know that this patient has a morbus Crohn, has a gastritis, has a arthrosis, okay, it's important to start your consultation, but it's not what you need in order to prescribe a remedy. Okay, you need something more precise. But I think that in some way, what you have seen in cases that you treated successfully with a certain kind of disease can be useful in addition to clinically confirmed symptoms, please, which are the most important part of this repertory. These diseases, I think, can be very important to tell you, dear colleague, I've treated a juvenile arthritis with this remedy. please consider that can be useful. And useful means just useful and not the reality, okay? Think about that it can be interesting to check it. So when I started to add from this 700 remedies information about 110, 120, adding all the diseases that I've treated successfully in my patients, which is important because when you read about certain kind of disease in the repertory, you never know if this patient had this disease in some way with this disease was able to live better, to keep going on with that without really not just improving but be cured, while I added remedies that I cured at least in 4 or 5 patients with 4 or 5 years with the same remedy. And so in the moment that I started to work on this section, which we called illnesses, we realized that it was becoming huge, gigantic. And so we decided to redo this work. And in the section illnesses, we have just the systemic illnesses, like, diabetes, osteoporosis, hypertension, whatever is not specifically affecting certain areas of your body, certain areas of your function. So whatever is a disease like glaucoma, this is reported in the eye section. Whatever is about tonsillitis, of course, is not in general illnesses, is in the throat section. Whatever has to do, what can I tell you, with the vitiligo or something like this, is not in general illnesses, it is in the skin section. So the first thing that you can realize in comparison with other repertories is that the number of the macro section is much less. Okay, and each one of this section is containing other section connected with this. For example, if you give a look to gastrointestinal, you see that in gastrointestinal section you have something about abdomen, rectum, and stomach. You don't have 3 sections. But as you can see, each one of these is divided in 3 other sections. Every section is divided in 3. So whatever is related with the pain in this section is in another section, which is abdominal pain. And whatever has to do with precise illnesses is reported there. Okay.
Massimo,
so this
sorry to interrupt. Do you want to share your screen so that we can see?
Is not shared?
No.
Really? I read in my computer that I'm sharing this.
Okay, maybe I have to. Okay, apologies. Actually, no, they can see it, so I should stop my sharing. Yeah,
So
sorry,
can you see my?
They can see it. Yeah,
Neil,
that's
can you
great.
see my screen? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, they can see it.
Okay, thank you. I was shooting myself otherwise. Okay, so you see that every section is divided in subsection. So when you give a look to eye section, you see that in eye, you have eye illnesses, eye pain, and vision. So the function of the eye is there. If you go to throat, okay, which is there, in this case, you have external throat, internal throat, larynx and trachea, and voice. But, as I said before, external throat is divided in external throat illnesses and external throat pain. So this is true for all the section in general. Something else that you should know is that there is something different also in comparison to other repertories. The mind section is just the mind. We decided not to add the mind illnesses. Eventually, I will explain you later on if you're interested why. And the section dreams, because I'm so much in love with whatever has to do with this section of the repertory, this part of the repertory is separated, okay? Of course, I did not do this work by myself. I have to thank you, my very good friend, which helped me enormously in doing this work, but I took care of mind section, precisely, dreams, of extremities, and back. Okay. My other colleagues did something else. You see that there is another section that is not so common to know, which is illnesses. This is what I told you before. This, I think, can be very interesting for you because there are many diseases, many illnesses, which are completely missing in other repertories. If you click on allergy, you will see that here I added all the different kind of allergies. You know that clicking here, you can see the remedies, okay? And by chance, the most of those are mama, which is not my mom, is Massimo Mangialavori, okay? So in this case, this is not me, Graphites, but you know, Daphne indica, cyclamen was added by me, castor equi, and so on. So there are many of these diseases that, in my opinion, can be very interesting. A polyallergic, for example, it's the concept which is completely missing in our repertory, which has to do with the patients that don't have just one or two allergies, they have more than this. But you know, there is so much more, because if you move on other sections which are below, you see about diseases like mononucleosis, osteomalacia, obesity, you know, there are many, the Reiter syndrome, you know, the different kind of rheumatism. So this is interesting because you have many, many more information from this point of view. And this is about the general illness, because as I told you, the precise one are in each specific rubric. Something else which is pretty interesting in my opinion, if you go to genitalia, in this section there is something else which is completely new. As you can see, there is female, and something interesting is that here we have a section that does not exist in any other repertory, which is called obstetrics. If you click here, you have all the symptoms which are related to whatever has to do with this beautiful branch of medicine, with the conception, with the delivery, with the lochia, with the problem of whatever happens after the delivery of the puerperius, the nursing, and these kind of things. So it can be interesting that if, for example, you go there in delivery, okay, you see the most important symptoms which have to do with that. And this is missing in every other repertory. This is something that for the moment, until they will not copy as they're doing with many other things that we did, it is just a matter of our precise work. Okay. Another strange macro section is called elimination. What does it mean? If you think about our system in a functional way, you could consider that thinking about remedies, huge remedies like the ones which are related with sulfur, not just sulfur, but you know, calcare sulfurica, kali sulfuricum, tellurium, or the remedies of selenium, which are so close to this. You can see that in all these remedies, for example, the tendency of our system to drain, to push out, to discharge is that important, not because you have a lot of symptoms in your kidney, in your rectum, in your skin. Your entire system is pushing out that much. So if you study the repertory from this perspective, whatever has to do with our tendency to discharge, to get rid of, is in this section precisely. So urine is there, stool is there, perspiration is there, expectoration, and all the other kind of discharges, okay? So this is important at the very beginning in order to understand how the repertory is organized and why the repertory is organized in this way, okay? Another important issue that we just added is this, which is called age. Why? Of course, I'm not that stupid or that superficial to think that certain remedies can be prescribed only in a certain period of our life. But you know, surely better than me, that certain remedies like calcarea, like baritas, like alumina, are much easier to be seen, to be recognized during our first years of life. I'm not saying that they affect patients only. I mean, it's easy to detect. And you think about different kind of mellifera, conium, if you think about remedies which have to do with the kind of decay of our functions, like the floricums and so on, it's much easy to recognize this remedy when they're old. If you think about all the remedies like many snakes, like lachesis, it's so easy to recognize this during the period, the so-called period of climateric. If you think about remedies where the attitude is that oppositional, like what I can tell you, many spiders, it's easy to recognize these patients during the adolescence, okay? So we collected all the symptoms that already does exist in our repertory with the symptomatology in children, in baby, in nursing, in adolescents, in senior, and so on. And we made specific section in this specific kind of age. I am proud to show you that because we are not sexist, we added andropause, but of course, whatever is here is only related to something that belongs to my clinical experience. So I cannot add more than this because I don't have so many more information about andropause. But I do hope to be able to continue to add my patient's observation in this section of the repertory, as I hope that our colleagues will contribute with the same kind of work. Okay, so this is a very wide perspective. There is something else that you should know in order to use more precisely the symptoms inside of each section. There are a few concepts that you should know. One is about what we did as a big work, which is to work on the concomitants. This is not something that we invented. There are few symptoms in our repertory where you can see concomitant. But this concomitance is not organized in a precise way. I mean, wherever this can be important. It can happen to you that, I give you an example. If you go to head pain, okay, so in head, this is head pain. Okay, if we are in general head pain, what does it mean concomitant? That instead of seeking for all these symptoms which are scattered in different parts of this section of the repertory, so if you open in your own repertory head pain general, you have all these symptoms here and there, but you don't have a specific area, which is the concomitants, where all the concomitants are reported. Okay, so whenever this is possible, in every single section, in every single symptom of the repertory, when this can be important, all those kind of symptoms are collected under this concomitant. Okay, I give you another example. If you go to gastrointestinal, okay, again, if you go to stomach pain, okay, here. Okay, in stomach pain, you can again write concomitant. And you see that here you have all the possible concomitants of this kind of pain. That can, in my opinion, can be very interesting because here you have all of those instead of moving here and there in this kind of symptomatology. If you go to respiration, okay, which is in thorax, respiration, asthmatic, okay? You again can see concomitant. And here you have in one single symptom all the concomitants all together. So consider that, because whenever you are seeking for whatever can be concomitant, whenever this is reported in the repertory, or whenever this was an addition of mine, if you search if there is concomitants, you can see that. Now, there is something that in the recent programs, in my opinion, is extremely interesting, which is this beautiful research that in this area you can write, as I just did, and you can go directly to the symptom. Before it was not possible. But for example, I remember that when I spoke with Marco the very first time, I told him, Marco, I understand that you come from such a generation. You have the half amount of years which I have. And so it's normal for you to think using Google or whatever is a search, which is good. This is a very interesting and fantastic function. But in my opinion, and not because I'm old, I think it is extremely important to read the repertory, to read this as a book. Because when you have to move into that, okay, even if you don't think about this, whenever you go there, consciously or subconsciously, you scroll it and your mind is stumbling in some symptom that you never thought in your life. This is the only way to learn how to use the repertory. Because even if you have fantastic homeopaths that can offer you more and more and more information, I am sure that if you honestly think about yourself, more or less you, I'm not saying always, but predominantly use the same kind of symptoms when you have to analyze a case. While those books are offering us so much more. So it is important that you can have a search, an intelligent search that can easily search for synonyms. This is very good. Before that was not possible. But this is not the same that obliging you to scroll it and to give a look to something that you never thought it was possible to find out. So please, my suggestion as an old homeopath, as an old teacher, use that, scroll it. If you want really to use professionally, if you want to be a good homeopath who knows how to use the repertory is an extremely boring book, but it is extremely useful. So the only way is to be patient, and little by little, whenever you scroll it, think that even if you don't want, even if you are not aware of it, you are always learning something new. So think that the repertory has to be studied, okay? Another concept which I think is important is the concept of localization. What does it mean that? Let me show you. If you give a look to the section which has to do with our back, okay, which is dov'è here? Qua, back, B. And if you think about a symptom like heat, okay, heat. Normally, in other repertories, whatever has to do with the different kind of areas of the back where this heat could be, we have to scroll cervical region, lumbar region, dorsal region, which are of course scattered according to the alphabet. I think that it can be more interesting, in my opinion, to have a specific space, which is localization. So whenever you click on localization, immediately you have all the area which are affected by this kind of symptom. From my point of view, this is more useful, much more practical than seeking for dorsal, cervical. You don't know if it is written sacrum or coccyx or thing like this, or the entire spine. So whenever you are thinking about something that can be useful in this way, you will always find the symptom localization with the all possible localization. It is obvious that sometimes you don't see this. If you have a certain symptom with 3 localization of 2 that are just one after the other, it doesn't make sense to add another symptom. But, you know, I'll give you another idea. Extremities, okay. Coldness, for example, which is here. Okay. You can directly search for localization. Sorry, I did a mistake. Sorry, I typed something wrong. I ask your pardon. Okay. So here you see localization, and directly you have in this precise place all the possible localization of this symptom. So this is true in every single section of the repertory. Okay, this is something that you should know in order to use it precisely and easier. There is something else which is another recurrent concept, which is whatever is related to our emotions. I give you an example. If you go to stomach pain, okay, which is here, and here you have something about, again, generalities. Okay, stomach pain. And you see something which has to do now with our emotions. Why this is important? Again, like when we said something about localization, like when we said something about concomitants. If you think about such a symptom, according to the alphabetical order, you have after anger, after contradiction, excitement, fright, vexation. Those symptoms are scattered in different parts of the same symptom of stomach pain in general. But if you're interested in whatever can disturb this patient according to which kind of emotion this person is affected by, again, instead of seeking here and there, you give a look to emotional, and all the possible emotional issues are collected there, which in my opinion is much more easy and much more interesting. So if you remain in the same section and you give a look to something very annoying like hemorrhoids, okay, rectum, I did a mistake, sorry. Should have given a look to something else. I did a mistake again. It has to be rectum illnesses, of course, because this is an illness. Okay, hemorrhoids. Here, if you search for emotional, you immediately have a look in which kind of emotion can be connected with this symptom, instead of scattering here and there. Another example, you go to respiration in thorax, okay? Respiration asthmatic, like this. Again, you click on emotion, and you have all the emotional situation which can be related with asthma, instead of, you know, moving here and there. In my opinion, let me say, this is, I don't say smart or intelligent, but let me say at least interesting, because it can allow you, whenever there is a symptom with some emotional issue, instead of seeking here and there, it is everything in the same place, which is, in my opinion, very practical. Something else that you see only in Suggesta, which is related to our sensation. Okay. Again, in thorax, if you go to the section lungs, okay, which is this. If you write sensation, instead, like in the case of the emotions, of seeking for every single possible emotion that can affect you, all the sensation which are interesting for this section of the repertory are all in the same place. So you don't have to seek here and there and there. So mostly if you are interested in how our patient is describing his way of suffering, you can search directly there. And all the sensations are reported in a specific place. They are all there. You don't have to move around in order to find them out. Okay, again, if you go, for example, to stomach, okay, and you, instead of seeking all the possible kind of sensation which are related to this, you write sensation, and all the sensations which are affecting the stomach are reported here, which in my opinion is very practical. Okay, because you don't have to seek here and there in order to find them out. Okay, let me give you a third example. If you go to ear, which is here, it's a kind of joke. Okay, again, you say sensation. You see how easily you can have all the possible sensations there. Okay? There is something a little bit more precise or confusing. We had a lot of debate with my colleague in order to write this and how to write this. But I thought that if you are really interested, as I am, let me say, in the language of our patients, in the metaphorical language of our patients, what they say, in my opinion, and not just in my opinion, can be very, very useful and very, very interesting. So something is if you say that you have the sensation of the opening of the ear, you have the sensation of something which is relaxing in the tympanum, of scratching and so on. But if you go to sensation metaphorical, we're talking about something else. Because if you use specific metaphors, instead of saying, I have the impression of swelling, so swelling is a concept. But if you say it is a balloon, or it is a pipe, like a cornamusa, or this swelling is like a balloon fish, or this swelling is like my full bladder, you are not just using the concept of something swelling. You accompany to this another metaphor that can be, in my opinion, even more interesting and more important. So if you are interested in this, whenever something is reported with metaphors, with clear metaphors, which is not swelling, empty, full, dry, or things like that, but I'm telling you, I have a worm, and why a worm and not an ant? And why an ant and not the finger of my child? Okay, you can think about whatever you want if you have a kind of itching. So probably there is a reason why this patient is describing this in a certain way. So the metaphorical sensation is something more precise, which is describing this kind of metaphors used by our patients. Okay, I hope this is clear. So we've seen the concept of concomitance, we've seen the concept of localization, which can help you directly to seek what it is. We've seen something about our emotions, we've seen something about our sensation and our metaphorical sensations. Okay. This is something that could help you to use more precisely the repertory. So there is something else that I would like to show you. The amount of cross-references that you can find out in Suggesta are many, many, many more than in other repertories. I was saying few minutes ago to Marco that a few years ago, when just the first version came out, Suggesta 1, we were the only one with this amount of cross references. I am happy, let me say this, I'm really sincere in telling you that. I'm happy that so many colleagues decided to copy that. So the reliable improves from this point of view, and even the new repertory that you're using too is full of this cross-reference that we added before. I give you an idea. If you go to mind, which is one of my favorite sections because this is the one on which I worked more, okay? If you give a look to a symptom like capriciousness, for example, give a look to how many cross-references you can see here and try to compare this with the repertory that you use. Okay, usually in our case, there are many, many, many more. This is just an example. I give you another one. Another symptom like hypochondriasis. Give a look of how many more cross-references, which are not an invention. They are not invented. Those are symptoms already existing in the repertory. And for some reason, nobody thought that those symptoms could be added to. So it's just a matter, when we did that, there was not this beautiful tool of the artificial intelligence that was seeking for synonyms. And even if now you have something like that, still is not as precise as we would like to. So this is another precise feature that you can only see in Suggesta for the moment. I give a look. Oh, sorry. We were in mind again. Sorry. If you're seek for something like paranoia, okay, give a look to how many cross references you have here. Many, 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 many more than in the other repertories. Okay. Let me show you something else, which we did, that can be useful for you to understand our work. If you search for activity, okay, which in my opinion is not necessarily an interesting symptom written as it is. So very often you have to do with synonyms that are telling us more or less the same issue. And it is so interesting that in our repertory, you can have two different kind of symptoms that are telling the same symptomatology with different kind of remedies. So in activity, there is nothing, okay? But you have the cross-reference suggesting you give a look to busy activity. So if you go there, it is interesting that beyond the amount of remedies, you can see here something else, which I think, in my opinion, is extremely useful. So you have something like activity unsatisfying. It's very typical, for example, let's have a look to that. To zincum, Crotalus horridus. This is interesting because you can see many patients hyperactive. Some of those can be busy doing something useful or doing something completely fruitless or something that can satisfy or unsatisfy completely our patients, which is something, in my opinion, that is adding something more precise to the concept of hyperactivity. Okay, so give a look to here. There is an addition, busy, activity, occupation, fruitless. And not by chance, the most of these are additions from me because I added the symptom of a fruitless activity, which is not present in our repertory. Or it is interesting that you can have to do with somebody who is satisfied by this hyperactivity, okay, which is something else. Let me give you another example. If you think about a certain kind of symptoms like contrary, I have to go back, sorry. Okay, contrary is one of the typical kind of expression that, in my opinion, could be used at the time of Kant, but nowadays is a concept that very seldom it is really used in clinical. So if you go to contrary, not to dissatisfy you, you see the symptom still existing there, but is empty, because it is suggesting you to go to something else, which is oppositional. So if you go to oppositional, you have at the moment the right way to call somebody who is contrary. And here you have not only more remedies, but even more sub-rubric. Okay? It is interesting that attention craves in children, okay, which is a symptom that does not exist in other repertory. If you click here, you see 25 remedies. And again, many of those are additions from my clinical cases. Let me show you something that in the other repertory is completely missing, because if you give a look to the numbers of symptoms that I added into repertory that were not before present, they are more or less 2,500, okay? So it's a lot of material. So concept like argumentative. Sorry. I'm doing a mistake here. Argumentative, you say, this is a concept which is not present in our repertory, that in my opinion can be interesting because you see how many beautiful unknown remedies like sinapis, scrofulare nodosa, sanicola aqua, ricinus communis, dare spinnata, okay, and many more you can see for such a very interesting symptom. But please, we don't have time enough this night to show you everything. But this is just to give you an idea that if you want to use Suggesta properly, you should give a look to that in order to know that certain concepts are there, even if you don't think about this. Let me give you some other example of interesting symptoms which are missing in other repertory. Okay. Sorry. Ambivalent. You surely know what does it mean, okay? There are many additions, again here, from Massimo Mangialavori. Other interesting one, for example, about our sexuality. Perché lo trovo? Sorry. Anorgasmy, okay. You see, this is another concept which is seldom reported in our literature, and there is a lot here about that. There are concepts that are completely new. For example, if you give a look about dependency, which can be very interesting. This is missing again in other repertories. Okay, here you have something interesting, people dependent by relationships. Okay. And other kind of dependency, which in my opinion are very interesting. Because again, here I added what I've seen in 40 years in different kind of patients. cocaine, drugs, morphinism, purgative, sedatives, section, stimulants, even those kind of people which are using a huge amount of unconventional medicine and supplements and things like this. All of this, let me repeat, it's coming from clinical experience, verified clinical experience, okay? In my opinion, those kind of things are very interesting because nowadays we see many patients like that. And this kind of information, again, are absent in other repertories. There are even concepts that are not so well known. This is something on which I worked a lot, which is the concept of oblativity. What does it mean? We had a discussion, I remember, a few years ago when the first version of the program came out, and the guy who was in charge of this for synthesis, where they added my symptom, he said, I don't know what is oblativity, let me write generosity. Generosity and oblativity is not the same. Oblative is somebody who is able to feel, to understand another person, and who has to give a lot, has to support, has to take care, has to be benevolent, has to give out at the cost of really sacrificing his own energy in order to help another person. The real oblative ones can be able to support and offer whatever you can do to a person who is politically in a complete different direction, who is not following your religion, who is completely different from you, but you feel that this person needs help, and you cannot go to sleep if this person is not better. Very often they have to be really devoted to that. They are doing this so much that they spoil their energy. They sacrifice their energy in order to help the others. This is not generosity, it's something else. Okay, so there are few concepts that are reported here. This is now pretty not well known, but if you give a look to something like orthorexia, for example, orthorexia is a concept that so all the eating disorders in our repertory are missing. Sometimes you can find out in the new ones something about anorexia, but most of these are under the stomach symptom. They are about appetite. That can be a lot of appetite, a poor appetite, wanting, missing, completely absent of things like this. But this is something else from anorexia. Anorexia is a psychiatric pathology, okay? It's not the problem of having your stomach empty or full. It's something else. So you have whatever has to do with orthorexia, which is a kind of compulsive disorder, okay? And you see other kind of symptoms that can be connected with this, which are here. Different kind of fanatic attitude. So religious affection is there because very often in fanatic people you can find this orthorexic behavior. Okay. I did a lot of work in another concept, for example. At the time of Kant, very often when a person had problems with something that was scary, whatever of this was under the symptom fear. But we know, after so many years of studying this, that something is a fear and something else is a phobia. It's not the same. There is a big difference because you can be afraid of something real, and if the object of your fright is absent, your fear goes away. If you are afraid of dog and there is no dog in this room, it's not a problem. If you have a phobia, it is something completely different because you can be phobic of sharks, even if you have a bat in a lake where shark does not exist, but you have this phobia because it is different, because it has nothing to do with the real object, a phobia. So surely in the next 50, 80 years, they will know more than us. But now we know more than what Kant did. So I'm not criticizing Kant at all. Please, each one of us is always a little dwarf on the shoulder of a giant, okay? But in this case, I think it's important to differentiate what is a fear from what is a phobia. So if you give a look to phobias, that is completely absent in our repertory, you have all the possible phobia that I have seen. You don't have here all the possible phobia which are known in literature, because I don't have cases for each one of these phobias, so I didn't add that, okay? I added what I know. I prefer to use the common name, because if you use the psychiatric name, nobody knows what is a bromhydrophobia or a tatophobia or a anginophobia or things like this. So I said phobia of choking, you know, phobia of corners, phobia of defecation, because defecalosifobia, I'm sure that probably even many psychiatrists doesn't know what it is, okay? But I think that can be very helpful for you, because something is the fear, I insist, something else is the phobia, okay? You have more. Let me give you the idea of something like over-rational patients, okay? Rational excessively. You see here? This is missing in many other repertory. I think it can be interesting. So I can go on a lot with that, but I cannot show you whatever new is in the mind section. Otherwise, we dedicate 4 hours just to this. It can be very boring. What I can tell you is that we have a website which is called Suggesta.com. In this website, I will start to add some lecture, short ones, about 20 minutes, where different kind of topics about repertories in general, not just Suggesta, but I will do that, of course, using my own Suggesta, are showed in order to explain more, in order to give you more information about that. Let me show you something else, another couple of things. The dream section is full of dreams which are completely missing in our repertories again. Let me give you a few examples. This dream of driving, it's a pretty common one, okay? And here you can see interesting symptoms like this one, where you are unable to control your vehicle, for example. Let me give you some others in order to give you an idea. If you give a look to what I call disgusting dreams, okay? Here, you see how many more remedies you have about that, okay? Or symptoms like dirty dreams. You have many interesting sub-rubrics that are not there in other repertory. If you think about dreams of enemies, for example, sorry, you see here, there is much more in terms of remedies. So if you compare which remedy you have here, which remedies you have here, sorry, in comparison with other computers, with other programs, sorry, I'm a little bit tired, you have many more remedies. Most of them are not so well known in our literature, and you have even many more symptoms, okay? So I think that this can be very helpful in your daily practice. Okay. Instead of whatever has to do with sexual, which means nothing, we added erotic dreams, because this is what it has to do. And you have all the erotic ones, which are there. Okay. So if you want, I can show you more if you have some questions, but I think that this should be enough for this night to give you some probably interesting ideas about which kind of gigantic work we did. Let me show you the last thing about another concept that, in my opinion, is extremely useful and has to be explained. Giving again importance to the words, to the metaphors of our patients, I have a particular eye, a very particular interest to whatever is commonly described by our patients about the way they suffer. I mean, each one of us, each one of our patients can tell you that they feel something which is tearing, which is penetrating, which is like a needle, which is stinging, or which is burning, or whatever you want. I personally think in my approach that when a patient uses this kind of objectives, this kind of metaphors, to be more precise, in a certain way, this means something. It is not an occasional symptom, as I call it. It is something more profound, which is telling us the way you suffer in this specific way. So in the general section, in generalities, if you go to pain, okay, you see that we collected together pains according to their synonyms. For example, when you have to treat somebody with chronic pains, this can be extreme, it can be unendurable, it can be maddening. You know, you can have different kind of words where the concept is the same. Okay, so in our case, if you go to extreme suffering, in extreme suffering, you have all the possible kind of symptoms which are that extreme. So what is important at the end, in my opinion, is not that you say intolerable, lancinating, or, you know, or driving you crazy, or whatever you want. Is that in some way this poor patient has to use a word, in some way this poor doctor has to use another word in his provings, but you can use different kind of words, synonyms, that can tell you more or less the same. So this is what we did. It's interesting because if you give a look to the suffering in the general section, you see that they are arranged in this way. Whatever is acute is under acute in different ways. And this is not only like that in generalities, it is like this in every section of the repertory. So whenever you study the pains, they are always organized together in a way of underlining which kind of metaphor the patient is using. So we did not change what is really already written, we just organize these symptoms. So if you give a look in pain cutting, for example, okay, you can have this kind of symptoms, which is not just about the area of the pain, but the kind of sensation or the kind of metaphor that is used by our patients. Okay? Look, for example, disorganizing pains is something like this when you are a pain which is in some way breaking you. Of course, please, you can probably understand which kind of huge work we did. And you can probably understand that this work is not paying back us at all for what we did in terms of hours of work. It was an amazing and extremely incredible amount of hours, okay? So surely there are mistakes. And in our website, Suggesta.com, there is an area where you can give us a suggestion. You can quote, sorry, Massimo, I've seen that. This is a mistake. Do you mind to correct it? Do you mind? I have a suggestion in order to make it better and things like this. Because, of course, let me repeat, I'm not excusing, but just trying to explain how complicated it is to do such a work. And of course, with this huge amount of symptoms, to make a mistake here and there is absolutely normal. Okay, in every repertory. A few days ago, I was studying a case that I'm going to present the next week in Austria in a seminar, and I discovered that I had the symptoms about helium, which I never did. So I said, how it is possible? And some of those additions of helium were my mistake, because instead of typing Helia, which is Helianthus, I wrote Heli without an A, and so Heli is helium and is not Helianthus, sorry. And in other cases, it was the program that when it exported the symptom, Heli was written instead of Helianthus. So those kind of things happen even with computers. If you think that in our original Kent, the most of the symptoms of Sphingurus, which is this beautiful porcupine living on trees, all the stinging symptoms of Sphingurus were reported by Spigelia. So if you say S-P-H-I-N, this is Sphingurus. If you write S-P-I-N, this is I-G is Spigelia. Those are not at all the same rainbow. One is a planet, the other one is a strange kind of porcupine, which even lives still on trees. And you know, those kind of things happens. It's impossible not to have that. So please, whenever you find something like that, in our website, there is a space which is dedicated to this. So we really appreciate if you have something to tell us in order to improve our work. Okay? So we decided with Marco to leave some space eventually. If you have questions, I would be delighted if I can answer to this. If you have something to ask, I'm open to whatever you want. Of course, if I'm able to answer.
Thank you so much, Massimo. We had a lot of good feedbacks and love in the chat. And yeah, let's see if there are some questions coming. And in the meanwhile, there have been some questions. And if you don't mind, I would like to share my screen for a couple of minutes.
Why not, please?
To show the search functionality, to search rubrics in Suggesta.
Yes. Please.
Don't shoot me. I know, like, what you just said, and I think it's very important, but since we had many questions on that, I wanted to show our search functionality as well. So Massimo,
can you stop my sharing? You can do that. You have to.
See.
So I stop sharing.
Oh, yeah, yeah, okay, yeah. Thank you. Stop sharing.
Otherwise, we cannot see what you say.
Yeah. So yeah, tonight Massimo showed all his Suggesta repertory using the Repertory Explorer. section, this one below, which is one of the way to use the repertory. The other one is through the search, this search box in here. And there is both semantic search and keyword search. And so some users were asking if they can search rubrics. And so I got a couple of examples prepared. So with the semantic search, as I also write already in the chat, you can search for something like explaining what you are looking for. You don't have to input the exact word as they appear in the repertory. So as you can see, I search for doesn't want to do anything, and we get rubrics such as apathy. Yeah, I guess apathy is especially like the one, probably the word that maybe we were looking for. Also, someone asked about German. So the repertory, as I said in the chat, it's only available in English. But the cool thing with the semantic search is that you can search in any language. So here I translated on Google afraid when on a tall building. And so I will search this. And as you can see,
you share your screen, you can see some example, Marco.
Are you not seeing my screen?
We don't. You have to share it. I don't see anything. You see those? So it's just me, sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, I think it's the problem I had before because I interrupted.
Yeah. Because we are both presenting our stuff. Sorry.
Exactly. No worries. So yeah, as you can see, the first one is fear high places. And again, even if we didn't mention high places, we searched for afraid when on a tall building in German. Still, we got those rubrics. And yeah, last example, this one. It's the concept. It's always the same. That it can be very helpful if you don't know how something is worded in the repertory. This semantic search gives you rubric based on the semantic meaning of what you search for, and it works in any language. So even if the repertory is in English, if you struggle, if English is not your first language, it can be helpful. And we also have the keyword search. So someone was asking, I think, if like if you search for ear, skin. So this one is the basic search that it's available on all the other softwares. And this one return rubrics only if the exact word that you search for are present. Yeah, I think this is, and very quickly, because it's not really in topic, but so this is the repertory section of the software, and you can only consult the repertory. If you want to add rubrics, you have to go on cases, create a new case. And then after you create a case, you would create a first analysis. And here on the right side, you have the repertory section, which is exactly the same as before. You can use the Explorer, like Massimo was doing, or the search here, like I showed you. And so the difference is that here on the rubrics, you have the green button that you can use to add the rubrics, and you can start. You will see them here popping up on the selected rubrics, and clicking on analysis, you will have the classic grid of the repertorization. And here we have 4 different sheets available in case you want to make more than one for the same analysis. And then, of course, you can create as much analysis as you want. Yeah, I think that's, and there was another question, Massimo, so I think I can stop sharing my screen. So someone was asking about future updates, and I mentioned about Suggesta 2.1, probably soon to be released, and also Suggesta 3.0 as well on the works. And I don't know if you have any more details on expected dates or features.
So, as in every program, when you have just adding to the first number, so 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, usually it is a small upgrade, which means in our case that we correct some mistakes, we correct some misorganization, we add some other remedies and some other symptoms and so on. Whenever it is a big upgrade, this is different because it means a substantial change in the repertory. I prefer to keep it a little bit secret, but the version .1, .2, .3 should be available in a while. As soon we will be able to fix a couple of things. So I guess that before Christmas we surely have the .1, which is a simple upgrade which doesn't cost anything. The version 3 very probably will come out. We have to wait another year because there is a big work that I'm doing, a huge amount of work that I'm doing that for the moment I would like to keep as something thrilling. It's another section. Okay.
Thank you,
with other
Massimo.
concepts.
By the way, if anyone wants to unmute now to ask a question, you are free. You should now be able to unmute yourself if you want to.
Can I ask you something, please? Hi.
Please.
Yeah, that's a beautiful piece of work you've added in there. I really appreciate that. I just wanted to ask you, I have Synergy software, and if I wanted to add this onto that as an add-on, would I be able to get all these features that
Yes.
you've shown us?
Suggesta is available for SHS, is available for Opus, and it is available for the new program from Marco. So these
Perfect.
three companies, they have this.
Thank you so
And it
much.
work. So let's say that what could be different, but this will be in the future, is exactly what I told you a few minutes ago, actually an hour and a half ago. So something are the data. So the data is Suggesta, okay? The way you use the data, the way you analyze a case using Suggesta and not another repertory is something else. And I am developing with Marco this feature, those modules of analysis, which in my opinion and also in my experience are analyzing the cases in a much smart way. And mostly, if you really are so keen to do such work, offering you a tool in order to analyze more professionally a case. You should think, as I said before, we have a Ferrari with the wheel of a chariot, because analyzing the cases that as we do with the vertical and horizontal line is really basic. We have some tool which is improving the problem of remedies with few symptoms and remedy with too many symptoms. But this kind of tool, according to what a good program could do, is really something extremely simple and very basic. So I'm so happy to collaborate with Marco because he's young, he's open, he's smart, he's quick. So whenever we talk about something like this, I'm not saying this in order to please him. I really believe it. It's for me a great pleasure because we can realize together what I was trying to do with David years ago. Now I can do that, and I can do even better because we have better tools. So I think I insist on that. It is very important, in my opinion, to have a good source of information, which can be this repertory, another repertory, directory, our literature, and so on. Think about, even if I'm saying this against my own interest, that the repertory is a tool. It is not a precise or perfect tool. And if Kant could have been born a few years ago, today the repertory would never exist, because now that we can directly search into our literature, into our cases, with a good database, what's the reason of scattering, reducing, readjusting this into repertory? So we have to think that we have to change dramatically our mind, because in few years, when the young new students will not be so stuck about the use of the repertory and can go directly into something which is not restricted like this, which is a funnel of the repertory, but something else which is much better, the repertory would be just another book. Another fucking book, let me say, politely. Not even the best, not even the most interesting one. So we have to change our mind in this direction, thinking about a different use of the repertory, first of all, and thinking about the use that the repertory is giving us some ideas, I insist, scattered. So it was fundamental to have a repertory when nothing better than a paper book existed. But now, I insist that we could do so much more. The repertory and the way of using the data of the repertory could improve dramatically, can be thought in a much better and much more different ways. So what I'm really hoping to be able to do with Marco is exactly this, not just offering him clinical data, which I hope they will be a kind of example for our colleagues, because surely I'm not the best and I'm not the only one. But if we do this work like a community, we can improve dramatically the sources and the reliability of our sources. And beyond that, I think the new step is to analyze, is to think about how to analyze our cases in a better way. You probably don't realize that when you click your analysis button in your machine, this program does what he wants, not what you want to do. The most that you can do is to rely on the grade of symptoms, which is very uncertain and very untrustable, and to realize on how many underlining you do to every symptom, not more than this. But we can do so much better in order to improve it. And I do hope to be able to do that with Mark.
Thank you, Massimo, for the kind words, and it's absolutely my big pleasure to collaborate with you. So I guess last chance to ask a question.
Sorry, yes, hiya. Beautiful work, amazing. It makes repertorizing much easier in my eyes. Yes. A quick question: do you use AI at all? The AI tool to analyze the cases?
Do I have to answer or Marco? Because probably we both have to say something. Let me say something and then Marco can tell you something probably more precisely from the point of view of somebody who is able to use this kind of tools. I personally believe that the artificial intelligence could be, probably will be a fantastic tool. At the moment, it's not like this. First, because we have to train these programs in order to have our data. And second, which is much more important, you have always to remember, Delia, that every program of artificial intelligence is working on a tank of data. So my question is, which data are filling this tank? Because there is a split in our culture, homeopathic culture, which I really don't understand why it's still existing. Because whenever we have this discussion, it is as if I don't believe in provings or I want to disclaim our literature. It's not like this. I'm saying, again, as I said before, our literature is something that can drive us to understand better our patients. The reality is not the literature, it's the patients, the cured patients. So at the moment, I can tell you that I tried years ago. I was supported by a very good foundation who wasted a huge amount of money to work on this project. And we were not able to try to ask to our community to share their data, to share their information. You don't know how many colleagues are so strict, are so scary. I'm sure that each one of us can have 4 good cases of calcarea carbonica, okay? Can you imagine if we can share just the good cases of calcarea carbonica, how many mistakes we can get rid of this huge remedy? So this is something that should be done easily and seems to be an impossible mountain to scramble in homeopathy. I don't understand why. I never understood why. So if we can be supported by good data, of course, a good program using a good artificial intelligence can do a lot. But unless we don't do this, and we think that we have artificial intelligence, so please ask to the programmer, okay, based on what? On which books? On which kind of a material? That's the problem. Because if the information are not reliable, are not good, you can use any kind of beautiful intelligence from whoever you want. It doesn't work. It is an illusion, okay? Or it is a delusion, to be more precise. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
That's my point of view. Sorry, please, Marco.
Yeah, I think what I can add is, I don't know if probably someone here already tried the AI functionalities on Similia, and I definitely agree with what Massimo said. It's based, the help that AI can give you, it's based on what it's trained, what it's working on, based on. And so what we do at Similia is that we use it on our own resources. So if you are using Suggesta Repertory, how AI can help you is by finding maybe rubrics that you cannot find, or suggest rubrics on the Suggesta Repertory. It will not, like it can happen with, let's say, ChatGPT, start giving you information out of we don't know where. And so at the moment, we have some AI functionalities which I think they can be helpful, but with time they can become much more powerful, and hopefully with Massimo we'll be able to work on that and bring really intelligent tools that can be helpful for the homeopathic practice. And Thomas,
Sorry,
yes.
Thank you, Marco. The reason I asked the question, I was going to say, is because I do use it in the Similia. So I do a contrast and compare. I like to do one with the AI to see what suggestions it throws after I put my notes. And then I do my own one according to what I heard the patient saying, which should be what the notes say. But I like to do both. That's the reason I asked the question, because I'm doing both. And I find it very useful. I didn't think I would say that, but I do.
Yeah, thank you, Delia. And yeah, I think it's, I mean, as you probably know, when you try to transform your notes to rubrics, you get, I don't know, maybe based on the length of the notes, you can get 50 rubrics, and out of them you will manually maybe pick 10 or 15 of them. And so with time, we definitely refine that to reach a much more accurate result. And yes, Thomas, yes, the
Thank you,
semantic
Delia.
search.
Anyway,
The semantic search, it uses an AI model to power the search. Yes, it works on our own database, of course. So it's not an offline model, but yeah, it works on Massimo. In this case, if you are using Suggesta, it works on the Suggesta. In fact, when you make a search with the semantic search, you will only get rubrics from Massimo Repertory, and there is absolutely no way that it creates a rubric that doesn't exist. It just helps you to find rubrics more easily if you are not, if you don't know exactly the repertory language.
thank you, Thomas.
Okay.
Yes, you did really a wonderful work. Thank you very much,
Grazie.
Massimo.
Grazie, Thomas. Thank you so much. Thank you
It's
so much.
it's a great pleasure. I will buy now Similia and use it. Is it possible to buy it now and use Suggesta 2nd?
Yes, absolutely. So Suggest it's already available. I wrote a message in the chat, but yeah, I will clarify here. So Suggest is available as an add-on at the moment on Similia. And the price, it's slightly different by region. It's 249 in Europe, 199 pounds in the UK, and $299 in the US and the rest of the world. So that's a one-time fee that you pay, and you have a lifetime license to the Suggesta 2.0 Repertory. Then regarding Similia, we have, so you have the free version that theoretically you could use the free version and only buy the Suggesta repertory, but with the free version, you are limited to create 3 new cases per month and 3 new analyses per month. And you don't have access to the AI functionalities. You have access to the semantic search, but not to the AI functionalities that, for example, suggest you rubrics from your case notes or suggest you rubrics from the picture of a physical symptoms. The professional version, which includes unlimited use, unlimited cases, and AI, it's $19.99 and €16.99 per month.
Okay, thank you very much.
No worries, I will drop. And actually, very important now that I remember, our subscription include a 14 days free trial. So if you subscribe now, you can use it. You will not be billed. You can cancel at any time and still use it for 14 days. And you will only be billed your first month in case you don't cancel. And for a pro subscriber, we can also offer a 14 days free trial on Suggesta repertory. That's not available on the website, but you can contact us either by email, I will drop it here, or through the help desk inside the application, and we can activate it to try it. While the subscription, you can immediately subscribe, and you have the 14 days trial there. The reason with the Suggesta you don't have the free trial automatically because it's a one-time purchase, it's not a subscription, and that's why we'll activate it manually.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for this evening.
Grazie, Thomas. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Thomas.
Unfortunately, you should know that I'm not saying to be unkind at all with Marco. This kind of things has a huge cost to design a program, to maintain a program, and so on. Just to give you an idea, I had this experience because I started to work with Marco very recently. But up to now, think about the huge work that me and my group did, okay, in order to design Suggesta. Do you know how much money I make out of every cell? €8. Okay, so this is the average. So try to have an idea of what does it mean to do such a work that with you do really because you trust in that and you think that we can do our best to improve our community. It's not for money. This money is necessary in order to build it and to make it alive. It's not going not to Marco, not to me.
Yes, I understand. I have my own database with a FileMaker since 30 years, and it is very good working because there were no database available where I used to put in my cases and make it better for research. Yes, like your work. I understand it. It's so much work and it's
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas, again.
Thank you. Okay, so if there are no other questions, yes, Massimo was saying before, we'll probably have another webinar with Massimo in a couple of months when we'll release the strategies and the modules for the more advanced analysis. And yeah, we'll announce it on our social media. So I think, Massimo, yeah, if there are no other questions, we can probably wrap it for
Good.
today.
I hope it was useful.
Thanks a lot, Massimo. I think
Grazie, Bill.
everyone loved it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope it was useful for you. Okay.
Was.
Have a nice night. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.